Apple pie is on the menu for dessert tonight, and I am working right now. I'm working right now on getting the apple filling ready, and then there will also be a crumble topping that goes in there. So over here I've got my two pie doughs, one for the bottom crust, one for the top crust. I just took those out of the fridge. I've been sitting in there for a while now, and I'm just prepping up my apples. What I recommend doing is you definitely want to peel the skins off. It gives an unusual taste to cooked apples if you leave the skins on. And then you just want to cut them up into bite-sized pieces. You want to cut around the core because you don't really want to get any of the seeds or the core in there. You just cut around the core and then cut them down into bite-sized pieces. And then we're going to put a little stuff in with the apples, and then I'll show you also how to make the crumble topping, which is a cinnamon sugar topping. It tastes really good. I've made this apple pie a couple times now. I did it for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. I've done it for some people's birthdays. It's a real big hit. Don't even notice that it's a gluten-free pie made with a gluten-free crust. Alright, so apples are on there. 2 to 3 apples depending on their size. I always seem to have a little bit left over no matter how many I buy. The type of apple doesn't matter either. That's really up to you and your personal preference. I think I've done a different type of apple every single time, and it's always come out tasting delicious. Okay, in there we're going to put half a cup of brown sugar. And 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Maybe if I can get it into the measure. There we go. I'm going to put some cinnamon in. The recipe specifically says 1 teaspoon. I feel 1 teaspoon not really enough. So I just basically put a coating over the top. But there's also going to be some cinnamon in the crumble topping, so you don't need to overdo it. And then I've got 2 tablespoons of butter melted down. And we're going to do 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Lemon juice will kind of help preserve the apples and keep them from getting all funky while they're being cooked. And then I'm just going to kind of mix this all together. A spoon. Okay, so you just want the apples to be nicely coated. The butter and the lemon juice helps the cornstarch and the sugar and the cinnamon stick to the apples. And what will happen is I'll have these sit for a while I'm working on the crumble topping, and you'll kind of get a juice layer on the bottom of the bowl. That's kind of a mixture of the apple and the butter and the cinnamon and the sugar. And it's a really kind of lovely juice that you just kind of add into the pie, and it helps keep everything nice and moist while it's cooking. Alright, so that's going to sit. And then I'm going to show you how to do the crumble topping, but I need a minute to set it up, so you'll just have to wait. I don't even want to do it. Alright, time for the crumble topping. So there's just a few ingredients that go into this, and it's going to make a cinnamon sugar topping that's going to go on top of the apple filling inside the pie. So first is 3/4 cup of my flour blend, and then 3/4 cup of brown sugar. And recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Again, I don't really measure that out. I kind of just put a layer of cinnamon over the top of everything else. Don't overdo it because there is cinnamon in the apple filling. The last part that goes in is some butter, and it does need to be chilled butter. You do not want melted butter. And a 1/3 cup. So kind of cut it into cubes as best you can, because trust me, you're going to want it, the smaller the better, because this is gonna get messy. You have to mix this, but you can't use a mixer. You can't use a whisk. You kind of have to use your hands. And so you can't be afraid to get a little dirty here. I have seen some recipes similar to this that say use a fork to mix it up. And I tried the fork method. I don't know how anyone ever gets a fork to work because everything just gets stuck to the fork and then nothing is happening. So you're going to keep pressing the mixture together using your hands. Again, don't be afraid to get a little messy. Kind of smush up the butter. What's going to happen is this butter is going to cause all of that flour and the brown sugar and the cinnamon to clump together, and it will create something that looks very much like what it's described as, a crumble topping. So I'm just going to keep going at this, and it will become more solid. You probably don't want to watch me do this because it will take a few minutes, but I'll show you what it looks like at the end so you know what kind of consistency you're looking for. So here is the finished product of our crumble. It almost starts to resemble a dough in a way, except for the fact that it crumbles apart. And you don't want it to be one solid mass. You do want it to crumble up. But it has clumped everything together. Oh, there's some stray bits of butter there. Has clumped everything together. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we are going to basically spread this out over the apple filling. So this is definitely a very sweet apple pie. If you don't want such a sweet apple pie, skip the crumble topping. It's a personal preference that I like, and it's been a hit with everyone I've shared this apple pie with, but feel free to make any adjustments to fit your personal taste. The next step is going to be actually building the pie, but I need to wash my hands first because they're covered in butter and sugar and flour and cinnamon. So, okay. Pie dough is ready to be rolled out now. A lot of people have their own way of rolling out pie dough. I found this little trick online somewhere, I don't remember, but it works very well because it causes very minimal cleanup. The pie's been sitting wrapped in plastic wrap in the fridge, so I just unrolled that. I did add a little flour because it was a bit moist from being inside the fridge. I did mention that could happen. Take another piece of plastic wrap, set it on top. Try not to have it bend into itself. I know that part's a little hard. And then you're going to take your rolling pin. I've got a nice little tiny one here, but it works for my purposes. And then start rolling out. Usually a plastic wrap sticks to the counter. Really start rolling out your dough. And then your rolling pin doesn't get dirty. You don't have a cutting board that you're rolling it out on that is getting dirty. Okay. You want it to not split like that. So come on. Stay together. You want to roll out fairly evenly. Oh, why is it doing this? And you want it as thin as you can get it, because if it's too thick, it's not going to cook evenly, and chances are that parts of it will not cook all the way through, which would not be very good. You do not want a doughy pie crust when you're done making pie. So even though the recipe I use to make these pie doughs says that it gives you exactly enough pie for a bottom and a top crust, what I find is it actually gives you too much dough for a bottom and a top crust. And you'll usually end up having some leftover, and some apparently sticking to the counter. So you usually have enough left to make like a small individual pie, and sometimes you also have leftover apple filling. So if you have any ramekins or anything like that to make some individual pies, you could have a little bit left over to do that. All right, so pie's rolled out, or the dough is rolled out, and now I'm going to put it on the pie pan. So I like to keep the bottom layer of the plastic wrap on, makes it easier to kind of get this going in the pan. Whoops. And then just sort of even it out as you need to So it is laying against the bottom. Kind of lift up the side so it fully falls into the pan. And then you're gonna have a bunch of extra. So just go ahead and tear off those extra bits because you don't need to have all that extra dough lying around. One thing I want to mention while we're over here is you'll notice I'm cooking the pie in a pan but on a cookie sheet. The reason for that is because the juices from the apple filling while they're cooking may break through your pie crust and start to boil over. To avoid leaving a big apple juice mess in your oven, cooking it on the cookie sheet will guarantee that any of those juices will get on the cookie sheet, specifically on the tin foil, which you can then just take off and throw away. No muss, no fuss, not a big cleanup. Otherwise, it gets into your oven, creates quite a mess, and can be quite a pain to clean up. Speaking of the oven, I should be preheating it right now at 375. So I'm going to get that started. And then we're going to put the filling in. So apple filling first. Again, I kind of want to show you it's gotten all those lovely juices on the bottom. It's really nice. It's going to keep your apples nice and moist while they're cooking. Put in as much as will basically cover the bottom of your pie. You can overstuff it if you want, that's totally up to you, but usually I have a little bit left over because I tend to cut up more apples than I need, but it's better to have more than you need than not enough. Actually, I think I might have exactly the right amount of apples this time. Miracle of miracles. And got all that juice in there too, so that's nice. Alright, the crumble topping gets to go in now. It's going to be spread out over the apple. Kind of crumble it up over it. Don't want it to kind of be in big solid masses. It's not very appealing when you bite into the pie. But there should be enough to basically cover the whole top of the pie in there. So I'll finish putting this on. I'll roll out the top crust. I'll show you what the final product looks like, and there's also one more step we'll do before we put it in the oven, so I'll check back in with you in a minute. The last step when making a pie is that you want to put a wash on your crust, some sort of barrier on top of the crust to keep it from drying out too fast while it's cooking and burning. So there are a couple options of the types of washes you can put on. A lot of people will recommend an egg wash. Personally, I find that a little bit too much work because you want to be using egg whites, so then you have to separate your egg whites from your egg yolks, yada yada yada. So a simple substitute for an egg wash is just using milk. So get a nice layer, use a pastry brush to kind of get every inch of that crust that's on the top. And again, it will just help this crust from drying out too fast while it's cooking and from burning. And once you've got a nice layer on there, we're going to put one final bit of sugar on top. It's a nice layer on the top. It will give it a nice look when it comes out of the oven. And you eat with your eyes before you eat with your mouth. Final step. I know I said the wash was the last step, but the actual final step is you want to punch some air holes into your pie. You can make nice designs with them if you like. I've seen a bunch of those online. But basically it's just to keep the steam from getting trapped inside, and it has a place to escape while it's cooking. And then it's going to go in the oven. Hot in there. And it's going to cook for 30 to 35 minutes. So check it about at the 30-minute mark. Make sure it's not starting to burn. But 30 minutes should be about right, and then you're also going to let it cool for 30 minutes after before you eat it. Otherwise it will be way too hot. So I'll show you guys what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. Apple pie is done. Take a good look. Come on, get closer. So you can see all that sugar we put on top just kind of crystallized. Looks delicious. Also notice the juices that ran over the side. Again, that was the purpose of the cookie sheet, to keep that from getting all over the oven. It's still in the cooling process, so we're going to eat dinner first. Pie should be done by then. I definitely recommend having this apple pie. It should still be warm after it cools. It's not going to be cold or anything. So I recommend having it with some vanilla ice cream. It's the best way to eat it. And there is your gluten-free apple pie. It's absolutely delicious. I definitely recommend that you try that one out. And the recipe will be on my Google Plus page. So have a good night, everyone.